Linoleum floor of the base hospital smelled like bleach and something older, something metallic, and I could taste it on my split lip as I lay there staring at the fluorescent light buzzing above me. My brother-in-law had broken into my quarters at CFB Pattawawa 40 minutes earlier, pinned me against the wall by my throat, and slammed my head into the corner of my steel bed frame until the skin above my left eyebrow opened like a zipper. I remember the sound my collarbone made when it cracked. I remember my father standing in the doorway, arms crossed, watching. I need to go back. My name is Isla. I grew up in Belleville, Ontario, in a house that sat on a quiet street off Dundas, the kind of street where people left their screen doors unlocked in summer and shoveled each other's driveways after a snowstorm. My father, Warrant Officer Gerald Bryce, had served 23 years in the Canadian Armed Forces. He was posted at CFB Trenton for most of my childhood, working in logistics, and he wore that uniform like it was grafted onto his skin. He walked like a soldier in the grocery store. He spoke like a soldier at Thanksgiving dinner. Everything in our house ran on schedule. Breakfast at 6:30, homework inspected at 1900, lights out at 2100. No exceptions. My mother, Anne, was the softness in that house. She was a piano teacher. She gave lessons out of our living room on an old Heinzmann upright that her grandmother had shipped from New Brunswick decades before I was born. I used to sit on the stairs and listen to her students fumble through their scales, and then afterward, she would play something just for herself, usually Debussy, and the whole house would change temperature. The walls got warmer. The air moved differently. She was the thing that made my father's rigidity survivable. She died when I was 14. Ovarian cancer. It moved fast. By the time they caught it, it had already spread to her liver and her lungs, and she was gone within 5 months. I remember the last afternoon. She was in the hospice in Kingston, and her fingers were so thin they looked translucent, and she held my hand and said, "You have more iron in you than your father does, Isla. Don't let anyone melt it down." I didn't understand what she meant. Not then. After Mom died, the house became a barracks. My father stopped pretending that civilian life applied to us. My older sister, Faye, had already married Garrett, a corporal at Trenton, and moved out. It was just me and my father, and the silence in that house was so heavy it pressed against my chest when I tried to sleep. I could hear him downstairs sometimes, opening and closing the fridge, pacing the kitchen floor at 2 in the morning, but he never talked about her. He removed her photographs from the mantel within a week. He sold the Heinzmann within a month. I came home from school one day and it was just gone, and there was a dent in the hardwood where the leg had been, and I stood there staring at that dent until my vision blurred. It was collecting dust, he said. That was all. I joined the Canadian Armed Forces the year I turned 19. I chose the military police branch. Part of me wanted to prove something to my father. Part of me wanted a structure that would hold me together, because I was falling apart in ways I couldn't name. And part of me, the part that still heard my mother's voice, wanted to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. Basic training at St. John-sur-Richelieu was the hardest thing I'd ever done, and simultaneously, the first time in years that I felt like I belonged somewhere. I was good at it. I was strong, disciplined, precise. I graduated near the top of my platoon. My father came to the ceremony, sat in the back row, and left before I could find him afterward. My sister Faye didn't come at all. Let me tell you about Faye. Faye was 4 years older than me, and for most of my childhood, I worshipped her. She taught me to ride a bike. She braided my hair for school. She let me sleep in her bed during thunderstorms. But something changed after Mom died. Faye pulled away from me and moved closer to my father. It was like she decided there was only enough room for one daughter in his world, and she was going to be the one who filled it. She married Garrett when she was 21. Garrett was loud, confident, built like a piece of construction equipment, and he worshipped my father. They went hunting together. They drank Molson at the Legion together. They talked about the forces like it was a religion, and my father was the high priest. Faye liked being married to a man my father approved of. It gave her status in our family. It gave her proximity to his approval. When I got posted to CFB Pattawawa after my QL5 training, I was 22 and ready to build something of my own. Pattawawa was beautiful in a stark northern way, pine trees and granite and the Ottawa River cutting through everything like a scar. I worked hard. I kept my head down. I made a few friends. Corporal Rhiannon Beaulieu became the closest thing I had to a sister. She was Acadian, from Moncton, and she had this way of seeing through people that was surgical and kind at the same time. She'd hand you a coffee, look you in the eye, and say something that made you realize you'd been lying to yourself for 6 months. By the time I was 25, I'd been recommended for a commendation. I'd helped break open an internal misconduct investigation at the base. 3 senior NCOs had been falsifying supply reports, skimming equipment, selling it through a contact in Pembroke. It was ugly, and uncovering it made me unpopular with certain people, but it also proved that I was good at my job. My commanding officer, Major Kathleen Proulx, submitted me for a Canadian Forces decoration and recommended me for promotion to Master Corporal. The night she told me, I called my father. I don't know why. Some part of me was still that 14-year-old standing in the living room staring at the dent in the floor. "That's the investigation that caused all that noise last year," he said. "Yes." A pause. "You should be careful about making enemies above your rank, Isla." That was it. No congratulations, no pride, just a warning that sounded almost like a threat. I found out later that one of the NCOs I'd helped expose was a friend of Garrett's from basic training. My father knew this. Faye knew this. Nobody told me. The commendation ceremony was held at Petawawa in October. The leaves along the river had turned, all copper and amber, and the air had that clean, sharp bite that means Ontario winter is coming. Major Pruse pinned the decoration on my uniform, shook my hand, and said something about integrity being the rarest form of courage. My father was not there. Faye was not there. Garrett was not there. Rhiannon was there. She took a photo of me afterward, standing outside the garrison chapel, and I still have it. In the photo, I'm smiling, but my eyes look like they belong to someone much older. 2 weeks after the ceremony, on a Friday night in November, I was alone in my quarters. It was around 2300. I'd been reading. The base was quiet. Petawawa in late autumn feels like the edge of the world. The wind comes off the river and rattles the windows, and you can hear the pine trees creak like old ships. I heard the door. Not a knock. A slam. Garrett was standing in my room. He was in civilian clothes. His face was red, and I could smell rye whiskey from across the room. Behind him, in the hallway, was my father. "You think you're better than us?" Garrett said. I stood up. "Garrett, you can't be in here. This is a restricted area. How did you get through the gate?" "Your father signed me in," he said. "Visiting family." That's what he told them. I looked at my father. He was wearing his dress uniform. His face was completely still. "Dad, what is this?" "You cost Garrett's friend his career," my father said. "You cost him his pension. His family is going to lose their house in Pembroke." His wife called Faye crying. "Do you understand what you've done?" "I reported criminal activity. That's my job. Your job is to protect the unit, not destroy it." He was stealing equipment. You don't know what he was doing. You don't know the full picture. You never do. Garrett stepped toward me. I could see the veins in his neck. "You've always thought you were something special, Isla. Little princess with her decoration. Do you know how many people are laughing at you behind your back?" "Get out of my quarters, Garrett." He hit me. The first blow was open-handed, across the left side of my face, and it knocked me into the desk. Papers scattered. My coffee mug shattered on the floor. Before I could stand, he grabbed me by the collar of my shirt and threw me against the bed frame. That's when my head hit the steel corner. I felt the skin split. I felt blood run down into my eye. "Garrett, stop!" I screamed. He didn't stop. He hit me again, this time with a closed fist, and I heard something crack in my chest. Later, I would learn it was my collarbone. At the time, it was just sound and pain and the taste of copper in my mouth. I looked at my father. He was still in the doorway. He hadn't moved. His arms were crossed over his chest, and his face was the same face I'd seen at breakfast every morning of my childhood. Calm, controlled, assessing. "Dad?" I said. "Dad, help me." He said nothing. Garrett kicked the side of my knee and I went down. My cheek hit the linoleum. The fluorescent light above me flickered. I could hear my own breathing, wet and ragged, and somewhere far away, Garrett was saying something about respect and family and knowing your place. Then they left. Just like that. The door closed. I heard footsteps in the hallway, and then nothing. I lay on that floor for a long time. The blood from my forehead made a small pool near my hand. The linoleum was cold. The light buzzed. I thought about my mother playing Debussy on a Sunday afternoon, and I thought about the dent in the hardwood floor, and I thought very clearly, I am not going to die on this floor. I crawled to my phone and called Rhiannon. She came in 12 minutes. She didn't cry when she saw me, but her jaw tightened in a way I'd never seen, and she said, "We're going to the hospital, and then we're going to the MPs, and you're going to tell them everything." My father was there. I know. You're going to tell them that too. The hospital at Petawawa documented everything. Fractured collarbone, 3 cracked ribs, laceration above the left eye requiring 11 stitches, contusion on the left knee, bruising across the throat consistent with manual strangulation. I filed the report the next morning. Rhiannon sat with me the entire time. The duty MP took my statement, photographed my injuries, and logged the complaint. Within hours, the chain of command was notified. Within days, the investigation was underway. And then the counterattack began. My father called Faye, and Faye called the base. She told them I was unstable. She told them I had a history of mental health issues. She told them I'd been erratic since our mother's death, that I'd been in and out of treatment, that I'd fabricated stories before for attention. None of this was true. I had never been in psychiatric treatment. I had never fabricated anything. But Faye said it with such conviction, and she had Garrett backing her up, and my father, a warrant officer with 23 years of unblemished service, nodded along. The investigating officer asked me to submit to a psychological evaluation. I agreed. I had nothing to hide. But the fact that they asked, the fact that my family's lies had created enough doubt to warrant a formal assessment, that was a wound no stitches could close. I called my Aunt Margot in Fredericton. Margot was my mother's sister. She'd been estranged from our family since the funeral, because my father had told her she wasn't welcome in our home anymore. "You remind me of her," he'd said. "I can't have that." Margot cried when I told her what happened. Then she got angry. Then she got organized. She connected me with a civilian lawyer in Ottawa who specialized in military law. His name was Hassan Khalil, and he was methodical, sharp, and utterly unintimidated by rank. "Your father signed your brother-in-law onto the base as a visitor," Hassan said. "There's a record of that. The gate log has his name, your father's signature, and the time. That's not just a witness, that's facilitation." Meanwhile, inside the base, things got worse. Someone accessed my personnel file and added a note suggesting I'd been counseled for interpersonal difficulties. I hadn't. Someone circulated a rumor that I'd provoked Garrett by having an affair with the NCO I'd helped investigate. I hadn't. Someone, and I never confirmed who, went into my quarters while I was at a medical appointment and took a box of personal items. My mother's letters, her prayer card from the funeral, a small wooden box with a lock of her hair that I'd kept since I was 14. That was the moment I almost broke. I sat in Rhiannon's quarters that night and I didn't cry. I wanted to fall apart. But something in me, some piece of iron my mother had seen 20 years ago, wouldn't let me. "They took her letters," I said. Rhiannon put her hand on my shoulder. "Then we make sure they can't take anything else." I went to the JAG office at CFB Kingston. I brought my medical records, my service file, the gate log, photographs of my injuries, and a statement from Rhiannon. I brought the results of my psychological evaluation, which confirmed I had no psychiatric disorder, no history of fabrication, and no signs of instability. The psychologist had written, "Corporal Bryce presents as an exceptionally composed individual with a clear and consistent account of traumatic events." The JAG officer, Captain Adama Diallo, listened to everything. She was methodical. She asked hard questions. She didn't flinch when I described my father standing in the doorway with his arms crossed. "You understand what will happen if we proceed," she said. "Yes. Your father could face charges. Your brother-in-law could face charges. Your sister could face charges for making false statements. I understand. This will be public. Within the military community, it will be very public. I know. She looked at me for a long time. "Good," she said. "Then let's proceed." The investigation took 4 months. During that time, Faye sent me an email that I've read exactly once and will never read again. She called me a traitor. She said I was destroying our family. She said our mother would be ashamed of me. That last part, that was the line she shouldn't have crossed, because I had a letter. One letter my mother had written to me that I'd kept in my wallet, not in the box because I carried it everywhere. It was written 3 weeks before she died, in handwriting that was barely legible, because her hands were so weak, and it said, "If you ever have to choose between keeping the peace and telling the truth, tell the truth. The peace they want you to keep was never real." Garrett was charged under the National Defense Act with assault causing bodily harm and unlawful entry into a restricted area. My father was charged with facilitating unauthorized access to a military installation and with conduct unbecoming. Faye was formally cautioned for providing false statements during a military investigation. The court-martial was held at CFB Kingston in April. The snow was melting. The St. Lawrence was swollen and gray. I wore my uniform and I sat in that room and I told my story, and I did not look away when my father took the stand and lied. He said he hadn't known what Garrett intended. He said he signed him onto the base because Garrett wanted to talk to me. He said he'd been shocked by what happened and had frozen. The prosecutor played the security camera footage from the hallway. It showed my father walking ahead of Garrett toward my quarters. It showed him checking both directions before opening the door. It showed him standing in the doorway, arms folded, for the entire duration of the assault. And it showed him walking out at the same pace he'd walked in. Garrett was convicted and sentenced to 2 years in military detention and a dishonorable discharge. My father was convicted of facilitating the access and conduct unbecoming. He was demoted, stripped of his pension eligibility, and released from the forces. Faye received a formal reprimand on her civilian record. After the verdict, I walked outside and stood by the river. Rhiannon stood beside me. Neither of us said anything for a long time. "What are you going to do now?" she asked. "I'm going to stay in," I said. "I'm going to make Master Corporal, and then I'm going to make Sergeant. And then I'm going to keep going until I've outranked every single person who told me to be quiet." She smiled. "That's a lot of ranks. I've got time." I went back to Petawawa. I requested a meeting with Major Pruill and told her everything. Not just the assault, everything. The retaliation, the file tampering, the stolen belongings, the smear campaign. She listened, and then she made calls, and within a week, the unauthorized note had been removed from my file. An internal review had been launched into how my personal items were accessed, and a formal statement was issued to the garrison, clarifying that I had been the victim of a crime, not the perpetrator of a disruption. My mother's letters were never recovered. Her prayer card was never found. The wooden box with the lock of her hair was gone. Some things, once taken, don't come back. You learn to carry the absence. You learn that grief doesn't ask permission, and healing isn't a straight line, and some mornings you wake up and the first thing you feel is the ghost of a hand on your collarbone, pressing down, and you have to breathe through it until it passes. I reached out to Aunt Margot again. She drove down from Fredericton one weekend and we sat in a Tim Hortons in Pembroke, and she told me stories about my mother that I'd never heard. How she'd once driven through an ice storm from Moncton to Fredericton to help Margot move out of a bad relationship. How she used to hum Bach party tas while she cooked. How she'd said, the week before she married my father, "I'm not marrying his uniform, I'm marrying the man. I just hope the man is still in there." We stayed at that Tim Hortons for 4 hours. I went through half a box of tissues and 2 large double-doubles, and I didn't care who was watching. My promotion to Master Corporal came through in September, almost exactly a year after the ceremony where I'd received my commendation. Major Pruill shook my hand again and said, "You've earned this twice over." Rhiannon was there. Aunt Margot was there. Hassan Khalil sent flowers. My father was not there. Faye was not there. Faye was not there. Garrett was in Edmonton Institution. And standing outside afterward in the October air, with the leaves turning copper along the Ottawa River and the wind coming off the water, sharp and clean, I reached into my wallet and touched the edge of my mother's letter. The paper was so worn it felt like cloth. I didn't need to read it. I knew every word. Tell the truth. The peace they want you to keep was never real. I folded it back into my wallet, and I stood there and I breathed, and the river moved and the pines creaked like old ships, and I was still standing. I want to say something to anyone listening to this. If the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones who hurt you, that doesn't mean protection doesn't exist. It means you have to build it yourself. It means you have to find the people who see you clearly, the Ryanuns and the Margos and the Hassans, and you have to let them in, even when every instinct tells you to lock the door. My mother knew I had iron in me before I did. She saw it when I was 14 years old, lying in a hospice bed with translucent fingers and a voice like paper. She saw something I couldn't see for another 11 years. I see it now. I'm still serving. I'm still at Petawawa. The river still freezes in January and thaws in April, and the light through the pines in the early morning is the most honest thing I've ever seen. I don't speak to my father. I don't speak to Faye. I don't carry anger toward them anymore, not because they deserve forgiveness, but because anger is heavy and I've carried enough. My name is Isla Bryce, and my voice matters, and the truth didn't need anyone's permission, and neither did I.